All right, guys, bear with me. I'm a little all over the place right now. I've been switching gears all over the place. But I watched a video recently and it like completely locked me in emotionally. Like it hit all the right spots. And we're going to watch that video now. And essentially this is like, well, I'm not going to ruin it. Just I'll let you watch it and then I'll chime in afterward.
Honorable delegates, heads of state, leaders of nations, distinguished representatives of peoples great and small, I greet you not as a career diplomat, nor as a man bred for banquet halls and handshakes. I do not come to you speaking the rehearsed language of polished politics. I come to you as a soldier of my people, as a guardian of a wounded land, as a son of a continent that has carried the cross of the world, yet has never worn its crown. My name is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, and today I speak not only for the 22 million souls in my nation, but for a continent whose stories have been twisted, whose pain has been ignored, and whose dignity has been repeatedly auctioned off at the altar of foreign interests. Africa is not Tobago. Africa is not a battlefield. Africa is not your experiment, your puppet, your warehouse of raw materials. Africa is rising not to kneel, but to stand. And today I say before this great assembly of nations, Africa will not kneel, one on the false generosity of global politics. For decades you've sent us aid with one hand while extracting our lifeblood with the other. You build wells in our villages while your corporations drain our rivers. You donate vaccines yet patent the cures. You speak of climate action yet continue to fund the very forces that...
So when you're living in this area, you have to leave it, like you cannot take yourself.
Burn our forests and dry our lakes.
You seriously can't give me 8 minutes without ads?
What kind of generosity is this? The kind that feeds the mouth but silences the voice. The kind that keeps a man alive just enough to keep him dependent. We are not blind to this hypocrisy. Let me be clear, we are not ungrateful for sincere humanitarian assistance, but we reject a global order that disguises exploitation as partnership. We reject financial institutions that lend with one hand and steal sovereignty with the other. Africa no longer wants charity. We want justice. We want control over our own destinies. Too on the chains of colonialism and its modern descendants. Our wounds did not begin with us. They were inherited legacies of an empire-building madness that saw us not as humans, but sheep, as cargo labor tools. My ancestors were not consulted when maps were drawn with rulers and compasses in Berlin. The borders of Burkina Faso, like those of many African nations, were not carved by our ancestors, but by men who had never stepped foot on our soil, who knew nothing about languages, our tribes, or our spirits. Today, colonialism has a new face. It wears suits, it hosts forums, it signs contracts in Geneva and Paris and Washington. But it still takes without consent. It still dictates instead of dialogues. It still silences instead of listening. If you want to talk about peace, then let's begin by unlearning the arrogance that peace is something only you can teach us. 3. On resource exploitation and the myth of development. They call us developing as if the theft of centuries did not set us back, as if the gold from our lands, the diamonds from our rivers, the oil beneath our feet did not build the very skyscrapers in which this assembly sits. Let us speak plainly. Burkina Faso is rich, Africa is rich in minerals and culture and wisdom and youth. But you have taught us to measure richness in GDP and export value. You call it development when a foreign company owns 90% of a gold mine on our land. You call it progress when your security forces guard cobalt mines but not our children's schools. That is not progress, that is piracy with legal documents. From now on we will define development on our own terms. Development that puts children in classrooms, not minerals on cargo ships. Development that respects the land, the people, and the soul of a nation. 4. On sovereignty and interference. Why is it that when an African nation makes independent choices, we are called unstable? Why is it that when we seek military cooperation outside the colonial sphere, we are labeled a threat? Burkina Faso has chosen to walk a path of sovereignty that is not a threat to peace. It is a declaration of adulthood. We are no longer under your guardianship. We are no longer your junior partners in diplomacy. We are a free people. If a nation chooses partners that respect it rather than exploit it, that is not rebellion. That is wisdom. Let it be known, no foreign power will dictate the alliances of Burkina Faso. We will build relations based on mutual respect, not historical guilt or present-day intimidation. fight on terrorism and manufacture wars. You ask why there is violence in the Sahel. You ask why our youth take up arms. But you do not ask who benefits when our minds are guarded by private mercenaries, while our villages are left vulnerable. You do not ask how weapons arrive in deserts that produce no steel. You do not ask why peacekeeping never seems to end the war. The truth is, many of the so-called solutions to African security problems are merely business models. Endless conflict has become a market, and African suffering has become a subscription-based service. Burkina Faso has decided to break that cycle. We will fight terror, but not with dependency. We will secure our nation not with foreign dictates, but with national dignity. 6. Our migration and human dignity. We do not want our youth drowning in the Mediterranean. We do not want our brightest minds fleeing the countries that once called us savages. We do not want remittances. We want reasons for our people to stay. Why do our youth flee? Not because we lack beauty, but because we are made to lack opportunity. Not because we hate our land, but because our land is treated as someone else's property. Migration is not a crisis, it is a symptom of wars we did not start, of loans we did not need, of a world order that tells our youth their only value lies outside their own homes. The solution is not border fences. The solution is justice for 7 on Africa's place in the world. Africa is not a mistake to be fixed. Africa is not a failed continent. Africa is the womb of the world, the cradle of civilization, the keeper of tomorrow's hope. We have been made invisible in global decisions that affect us deeply. At the UN Security Council, Africa with 54 sovereign nations has no permanent seat. What justice is this? You call it balance, we call it betrayal. You speak of democracy, yet uphold a global structure where the powerful few veto the dreams of the many. We will no longer whisper in rooms where we deserve to speak with full voice. Aid on faith and spiritual dignity. We are a spiritual people. Before your cathedrals, our ancestors sang to the sky.
Puerto Rico is a great place to do business, not just because of the world-class tax incentives. It's also...
I swear it's getting worse. Fucking Google. At least I think Google owns YouTube.
Your missionaries, we knew the language of the rivers and the laws of the sacred forest. Christianity came, Islam came, and we received them not as slaves but as seekers. But now we ask, will the church and the mosque stand with us, truly with us, when all people are displaced by greed, mosque as globalization? Will your pulpits echo our cries or only repeat the songs of the powerful? Faith, too, must be decolonized. It must walk with the poor, not the privileged. 9, on unity among African nations. This is not a speech from one country. This is the stirring of a continent. You see Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso forming a new bond. You fear our unity. Why? Because it threatens the myth that Africa can only rise under your supervision. We are uniting not to wage war, but to wage dignity, to pool our courage, to share strength, to protect each other when the world turns its back. Pan-Africanism is not a dream. It is our lifeline, and we will build it stone by stone, heart by heart, with or without your approval. 10, to the youth of Africa, to the young boy selling oranges by the roadside, to the girl who walks 10 kilometers to attend school, to the child whose only toy is a stone but who dreams of stars. You are the reason we fight. Do not believe the lie that your continent is cursed. You are the blessing. Do not envy foreign passports. Be proud of your name, your land, your roots. The world may not applaud you now, but the future will speak your name in honor. 11 final words we will not kneel. I do not come to declare war, I come to declare will. So we will not kneel to fear. We will not kneel to foreign banks. We will not kneel to outdated empires masquerading as friends. Africa is not asking for a seat at your table. We are building our own a table where no child eats last, where no nation is silenced because it lacks nuclear arms, where justice is not filtered through the lens of race or history, but shared as breath is shared. This is our vision and this is our vow. Let the world hear it today and always. Africa will not kneel. Thank you.
So, as far as I can tell, everything that he said, especially toward the beginning, is just factually true. Africa has repeatedly been fucked over, and their resources have been taken in the name of industry and globalization, yet it's completely unfair. It's their resources. They should be entitled to it. But apparently that's not how things work. And there's insane amounts of evidence to this claim. So some of this isn't a fact or fiction sort of thing. Like it can't be a fact or not because it's more opinionated. But I happen to agree with literally, I believe every single thing he said. So, and I'm pretty damn sure that a ton of people in Burkina Faso would agree with everything he said because these are people that have dealt with this and lived this shit probably their whole fucking lives. And this has been like bubbling over and like a major thing that people talk and think about for long time. But this is why you can't always just let emotion run wild. Just because someone says exactly what you love to hear, because I resonate with it. But like to me, I'm like, why the fuck can't we get someone like that in the United States? Now it would be different, of course, because we haven't had like a massive history of being fucked over by the United States because we are the United States. But that being beside the point, his words, at least his rhetoric, is all about the poor and lifting them up and like fuck this like colonial bullshit and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's easy to let this fucking like sink in and grab you by the fucking emotions. But after doing a little bit of digging, see, this is one of the most common tactics by dictatorial people, like tyrants. They put on a face of being of the people for the people, but they're not. And the way you tell is by gauging their actions, not their rhetoric. What do they do? Now, so this is, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but Ibrahim Traoré, the president of the transition of Burkina Faso. He has been, he served as the interim president of Burkina Faso since 2022. He is a Burkinabe military officer and politician. So remember that ever since 2022. I'm going to swap over and bring up a Human Rights Watch World Report for Burkina Faso. Oh, I think you have the option to just swap. Damn, I need to remember that in the future. That's a lot faster. Anyway, I have no reason to believe that Human Rights Watch would be biased or like try to fuck people over or lie about them because they're completely independent, or at least to my knowledge, they're completely independent. But okay, let's read a little bit of this. Burkina Faso's human rights situation deteriorated considerably in 2024 as deadly attacks by Islamist armed groups against civilians surged and military forces and pro-government militias committed abuses during counterinsurgency operations. The United Nations Human Rights Chief expressed concerns over the rise in killings of civilians by armed groups and state actors. An estimated 6,000 civilians died in conflict-related violence between January and August 2024 alone. By August, the conflict that began in 2016 had forced over 2.3 million from their homes. 2.1 million people were displaced internally and over 200,000 to neighboring countries. Burkina Faso's military junta, which took power during a 2022 coup, cracked down on the media, the political opposition, and dissent, contributing to the shrinking of civic space. Now, it's worth noting, I'm taking a break from the text for a second. Being that they are fighting sort of on two fronts because they're dealing with the Islamist armed groups, that is separate from what we're dealing with here. What I'm primarily focusing on is the actions of Traoré as a leader or interim leader at the military junta that took over essentially, well, not essentially, as a coup, a direct coup in Burkina Faso, what have they done since then? They've had years. So what I'm getting at here is you can't really put any of the blame on the Islamist groups and the fighting and bloodshed that they've caused, unless it's directly unless it's directly caused by the government or the military in this case, because they are the government. Yeah. Continuing. So, but like I was saying, this particular part right here is very important. Burkina Faso's military junta, which took power during a 2022 coup, cracked down on the media, the political opposition, and dissent, contributing to the shrinking of civic space. Now, notice that his rhetoric was all about freedom, taking back freedom. And by the way, I agree, and this is why things get complicated. Two things can be true at the same time. They can want freedom from, like, for the people from colonial powers. That can be true. And also, he can be pretty much using freedom and all this great rhetoric about revolution and getting away from colonial powers as an excuse to hold on to power himself and enrich himself. And that seems to be what's going on based on this. You have no reason to crack down on media, political opposition, and dissent if you are legitimate. In May 2023, Prime Minister Apollinaire Kylem de Tambela announced the delay of elections scheduled for July 2024. On May 25th, 2024, following nationwide talks largely boycotted by the opposition, the junta announced that it would remain in power for another 5 years. Now, let's keep in mind, I'm breaking from the text again, and I'm being distracted by kittens, that, what's his name again? Traoré promised that in 2 years they would have a fair, legitimate, democratic election. And then they changed their mind and said that they wanted another 5 years. And to my knowledge, they gave no good reasoning for it. Continuing. Military authorities clamped down on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people's rights. In July, the junta approved a revised family code criminalizing homosexuality. The revised code did not specify penalties. On November 9th, a government source told the media that Burkina Faso's junta planned to reinstate the death penalty, which was abolished in the 2018 Penal Code. The last known executions in Burkina Faso were in 1988. On January 28th, the junta announced it would leave the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, along the Mali and Niger, limiting opportunities for its citizens to seek justice through the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice. On July 7th, the military leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger signed a treaty establishing the Confederation of the Sahel States, taking a mutual defense pact signed in September 2023 a step further. I'm not going to read abuses by Islamist armed groups, because unless it's like some crazy conspiracy that the Islamist armed groups are actually being funded by the military junta, then yeah, it's not relevant. It's a separate issue. Abuses by state security forces and pro-government militias. Burkinabe military and VDPs killed at least 1,000 civilians between January and July 2024. According to ACLED, and forcibly disappeared dozens of others during counterinsurgency operations in 2024. On February 25th, the military summarily executed at least 223 civilians, including 56 children, in the villages of Nandin and Soro, North region, in apparent retaliation for an attack by Islamist fighters against a Burkinabe military camp outside Ouagawa city. Probably mispronounced that. If I'm not mistaken, that is the capital. These mass killings appear to be part of a widespread military campaign against civilians accused of collaborating with Islamist armed groups and may amount to crimes against humanity. Media reported that between April 27th and May 4th, soldiers killed up to 400 civilians during counterinsurgency operations in 15 villages located along their itineraries. A video circulated on social media in July and verified by Human Rights Watch shows 18 men wearing Burkinabe army uniforms standing by while 2 use knives to disembowel a dismembered human body. Crackdown on the media and dissent. The military junta has used a sweeping emergency law against journalists, critics, and judges. Between August 9th and 12th, the security forces notified 7 judges and prosecutors that they had been conscripted to participate in military operations against Islamist armed groups between August 14th and November 13th. On August 14th, 6 reported to a military base in Ouagadougou, the capital, and have not been heard from since. All 7 judicial officers had opened legal proceedings against junta supporters. In February, armed men in civilian clothes abducted Rasmani Zanaba and Bassirou Badjo, members of the civil society group Balai Sedoyan in Ouagadougou. In June and July, Zanaba and Badjo appeared in 2 videos posted on Burkina Faso's state TV YouTube channel wearing military uniforms and participating in military exercises, presumably in a conflict zone. In early November 2023, the Burkinabe security forces had notified a dozen journalists, activists, and political opponents, including Zanaba and Badjo, that they were being conscripted to participate in security operations. On December 6, 2023, a court in Ouagadougou ruled that the conscription orders concerning Zanaba and Badjo were illegal. Just a moment. It is hard to do this when I've got a freaking butthole kitten behind me literally stabbing me in the back with his claws repeatedly just to be an asshole. The military junta has also abducted civil society activists and political opponents. In January, unidentified men presenting themselves as members of the National Intelligence Service abducted Guy Hervé Cam, a lawyer and coordinator of the political group Serve and Not Be Served, inside Ouagadougou's international airport. Cam was released on May 29th after the Ouagadougou Court of Appeal ruled against his arrest, only to be rearrested the following day on charges of, quote, conspiracy and remanded in a military prison. On July 9th, a military court ordered Cam's release on bail. On July 31st, a military prosecutor summoned Cam, ordered against his arrest for attempt at destabilizing the country, and remanded him in prison. In June, Serge Olin, director of the publication L'Événement, Khalifara Serra, commentator on the private television channel BF1, and Adama Bayala, also commentator on the same TV channel, all critics of the junta, were abducted by unidentified men and remain missing. In October, a member of the Justice Ministry stated that the 3 men had been conscripted. It goes into accountability for abuses, but essentially there's scant progress in investigating all this shit, and it makes sense because the people who perpetrated it are the people in power. So, yeah, I'll link both of these, but the whole moral of the story here is this is why you don't think emotionally. This is why you have to look up. Even if it sucks, even if it's a pain in the ass, you have to fucking research shit. Because it's one of the most common tactics in the book to use your emotions against you for propaganda reasons. It's sad to see because it would be really fucking awesome if a person, like, he was very charismatic, said just the right things. Like this fucking speech was fucking spot on for garnering support from people with fucking empathy. But anyhow, it's unfortunate that it was bullshit. Thank you for your time.